We are bombarded with so much of emotions. We don't understand our emotions very correctly and we do not know how to respond to certain people. I got emotional depletion because we do not know now. We ask smileys to express our emotions, but we do not know how to express when somebody comes and meet you that how should I express myself. So welcome to the Leaders of Future podcast. I'm your host Manish Behl. I am honored to be joined by Tyler, and he's from the Digital Wellness Institute.
Thank you, Manish.
In workplace, this depletion is happening because we do not know how to express emotions anymore. And we go to AI and ask that, how should I write sympathetic mail, add some compassion to it. So we are missing vocabulary for emotions further, and I don't think so it should happen. I love your concept of your book of tactical disconnection. I've also written a book called Observe, which is very similar on thought process on that. Could you share how this tactical disconnection works, especially in that triple peak workday? I like the concept of it. Triple week workday era. Can you just elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So tactical disconnection is my book, and it's a term that is used to define the intentional habits and the intentional practices of creating space between us and our technology during the day. And you can think of it as micro moments. That's absolutely correct. What it really is focused on is, again, when we place ourselves on that spectrum of digital use, and we find ourselves in the zone of digital overuse, right? And that's synonymous with the zone of negative outcomes. When we're in the zone of overuse, we experience negative outcomes. Tactical disconnection refers to strategies, micro practices that we can use when we find ourselves in that zone to get back to that state of parity, to get back to that state of optimal usage. And so it really focuses on three main aspects, and those are perception, intention, and action. And within those domains, or within those umbrellas, we have a series of micro tactics that we can implement during our workday and during our personal day outside of work to reclaim that sense of parity, to get back to that state of optimal usage.
So welcome to the Leaders of Future podcast, where we explore the bold ideas, deep insight, and transformational practices shaping the new generation of leaders. I'm your host Manish Behl. Here is a mind-blowing fact to start off today's podcast. In 2025, nearly 37% of global population, which means over 2.8 billion people, are addicted to internet. Millions facing a severe digital addiction. 70% of teens and young adults in US alone are addicted to internet and digital mediums. It is found the addiction is very similar to substance addiction as well. And 64% of young children are facing a sleep deprivation and mental disorders and late night scrolling and going through the internet all night. It's depleting their attention span dramatically. And as you know that our attention span is already shrinking. It's less than 8 seconds. So how do we protect our mental well-being? How we protect this digital storm which is thriving in this world? So today we explore this urgent topic of mental well-being and digital well-being. What truly means, what's the neuroscience behind it, and how can we reclaim this control in our life? And to do that, I am honored to be joined by Tyler, a global thought leader on digital wellness, and he's from the Digital Wellness Institute, who is transforming how individuals and organizations thrive in this digital era. Warm welcome, Tyler, and thank you so much for taking out your time. In life, what happens that, something big comes as a shock, then life changes. Like universe is an outcome of a big bang. Tyler, give your personal moment, maybe a burnout or a sleepless night. What inspired you or what sparked you to work on this digital wellness?
Thank you, Manish. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me. My journey to digital wellness really spanned a number of years, and I'll call those years kind of that awakening that I had. And I'll start with the experience that I had as a 18-year-old. I had the good fortune of taking a year off and sailing on a sailboat with my mom and dad. We dropped everything we had back in the United States, and we essentially moved our lives over to Greece and Turkey. And I lived on a boat with my mom and dad for the better part of a year. Now, what was unique about that, Manish, was that my eyes opened to the way that time slowed down. When you are on pace and you are tracking with the pace of the wind and the waves and everything that comes with being out in nature, I recognized how tuned in I had been during my high school years to a lot of the things that are really superficial, right? They don't bring meaning, they don't bring value, but they seem to in the moment. A like on social media or a new follow on your platform. But what I recognized and what was beautiful about this moment in time, and this was in 2012, was that it was a fascinating moment in the span of human history where I had the ability to connect with my friends and my family back in the United States when we went into internet cafes, right? And that was something that humans for pretty much all millennia prior to that could not do, could not say. I had a new niece that was born right around then. I could FaceTime with my brother, see my niece grow up, and I felt truly connected. However, in the moments where we were away from cities or away from port or away from internet cafes, I lived as humans had lived for millennia prior, right? I was with my family, I was with my tribe, I was truly connected to the things that brought meaning and value and happiness and contentment in life, and not thinking about all of the other things that were more superficial and that I found through the internet. This was the impetus for my feelings of what I term digital balance, right? It's this notion that we have the autonomy, we have the ability, we have the decision and the control over the way in which we interact with technology. And we can simultaneously maximize all of those incredible benefits, as I just described, while also disconnecting, choosing to disconnect so that we can live a life of intentionality and connection with those around us.
And how many times do we get this moments that we can isolate ourselves in a place where we are not crowded with this digital disturbance or interference in our life? Or I go for my meditation, long meditation retreat. I feel really alive again. I feel that, I'm active again. I'm thinking, I'm seeing, I can think very differently. And the moment I come back, hit an urban place, I quickly take out a phone or a screen or watch something. I suddenly go in that zombie mode and then sucked into some matrix of a new world, which is completely different. During this pandemic, adult screen time increased almost by 60%. That also triggered a lot of rise in anxiety, depression, sleep disorder issues. And these were the lot of turning point for people to understand that can we really get away from these screens. Overload, which we call signs of overload, the information overload, the data overload, the financial overload, everything is an overload state. And especially in digital overuse is dramatically high. What's the most shocking research, Tyler, you have come across about this digital overuse of our brain, and how does it reshape how we live and lead and how it will reshape in future?
Yeah, well, you said it exactly right. It's a correlation. It's not causational. However, it is correlational. The impact between increased rates of screen time as well as reduced matters of gray matter in the brain, thinning of the prefrontal cortex, all of which has resulted in a decreased ability to pay attention and to focus on what truly matters. And at the heart of this is, as you and I'm sure many of your listeners know, is a process called neuroplasticity, right? And effectively what we're talking about when we say neuroplasticity is we're referring to the brain's ability to change itself based off of the stimuli that it receives. In other terms, Dr. Daniel Siegel frames it as such. He says, where your attention goes, your neural network goes. It's seen in the pianist's ability to play a song, right? At first, it's very difficult. But after you practice more and more and more, you reach an ability to master that piece, and your hands move effortlessly over the piano. And in my book, I talk about this process of neuroplasticity and the notion of actually mastery. Malcolm Gladwell talks about the idea that 10,000 hours practice, of deliberate practice, is what we as humans need, or what those that are experts in a field need in order to reach mastery. Ended up calculating using the average amount of screen time that an 18-year-old person has each day, which is around 6.8 hours. And I found that it would take that person 2.5 years, only 2.5 years, to reach that 10,000 hours mastery, right? And so what I'm really trying to get at is that we are changing our brains without knowing it through the way that we are spending our time. And the way that we're spending our time is on increasingly short form content in the form of TikToks or Reels, many of which we look at for 2 seconds before deciding if we're interested or not. And yes, all of this is correlating to an impact on our brain and an impact in our attention span. Our attention spans, as you mentioned, are shrinking, and it's showing up in several standardized test results. SATs over in the United States, decline in language and math, ACTs as well. It's a large issue. And I think when it comes to one of the most interesting scientific studies that I've seen, and it's one of the most commonly referenced ones, so it's not earth-shattering or groundbreaking, but it was a study on cab drivers in London. And they were finding that thinning effectively their frontal lobes in their brain with the advent of technology, with the advent of Google Maps. Cab drivers in London no longer had such thick or well-developed prefrontal or frontal lobes. Well, what resulted was, without them having to navigate those areas themselves, and by relying on technology, that area of the brain could be freed up for other things. And so cab drivers that maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago, did not need to rely on technology to get from point A to B, now can rely on technology. And thus that aspect or that area of their brain that was previously devoted to mapping out the entire city in their mind was reallocated to whatever else they were spending their time on. So that really just goes to show the power of our attention. And where our attention goes, our neural network grows.
The London cab drivers is quite famous study. Mindful Science Center, and we do a lot of research what's happened. And digital wellness is very important cog in a wheel of mindful awareness, mindful leadership for children. And we found almost 71% of Gen Z already using this wellness apps. If you could redefine digital wellness for the modern age, what that mean, especially when there are so many apps?
Yeah, great question. So it needs to start with a definition. The definition of digital wellness, as we define it at the Institute, is the optimal state of health and well-being that each individual using technology is capable of achieving. So again, that optimal state. And in order to understand an optimal state, we need to get a reference point. We need to understand where are we at in regards to that point of optimal usage. And that comes with a high degree of introspection. And of course, we can feel it in our bones. Sometimes we understand that we are overstimulated. Sometimes we understand that we are overconnected. But other times, we don't see that. And sometimes we need an objective measure to understand where we are in relation to that point of optimal usage. And so for that reason, the Digital Wellness Institute has created the Digital Flourishing Model and the Digital Flourishing Survey, which is a scientifically validated assessment that allows anybody to understand and assess where they are at in that digital wellness continuum. When I say continuum, I'm referring to that, if you imagine a line graph, and on one end, you have digital overuse, or some use the term addiction, and then on the other end of that spectrum, you have digital abstinence, complete avoidance. What we want is to be right in the middle. We want to be at that point of optimal usage. And so to answer your question, we can use scientifically validated surveys to help us assess where we are at on that continuum. But what we really need, Manish, is an understanding and greater clarity around the term digital wellness. And we need to include this in a lot of our approaches to psychology, therapies, and approaches to education. You know, for students, if they're having attention deficit disorders or difficulty concentrating, we need to not only look at signs of that, but we also need to look at perhaps what may be the root cause of that. And a lot of that comes down to, what are your practices in regards to technology, not only as a child, but ultimately what is being modeled by the family? What is that child seeing? What are they doing that their parents are also doing, that they're mimicking? So that is really, really important for us to look at digital wellness not only as this side part of wellness, but actually an integrated and holistic part of human wellness. Because as you mentioned, humans are so closely intertwined with technology. So we can no longer think of it as something distinct or separate from other parts of individual psychology or, in my view, organizational psychology. We must think of it as intertwined and a core aspect of its entirety.
Every individual is designed very differently. His use or her use is very different. Her sleeping pattern is very different. Her exposure or his exposure to technology is very different. Children who are constantly watching games or playing, or there are people who are constantly watching reels, or there are certain people who are professionally working constantly. So the need for these tools are very, very different. So which digital wellness tool or practice you have seen can make a measurable difference in across the board? That one important part in that, especially when you do the workshops or you do the intervention, I have seen that when we do as a mindfulness intervention, we see dramatic drop in usage, but that suddenly goes back again after a few days. The moment intervention finishes, that time there is a revelation, but suddenly the use gradually started to go up. So can you share some real life story where you have done this intervention and it has built a remarkable change?
Absolutely. Because as we know, it is very, very difficult to change behavior, even when we know it's the right thing to do, even when we know we should not eat as many sweets as we do, even when we know smoking is bad for us. There is an addictive component to each of those, to sugar and to nicotine, that makes it very, very, very difficult to choose the right decision. And the same applies to our digital usage. Digital tools, as we know, have been designed specifically to hijack aspects of the brain that really, the reward mechanisms of the brain that make it feel good to continue to consume that. So when I think about behavior change and what I implement both with my individual and my corporate and my university clients, is aspects of environmental change, making the good decision easy and making the bad decision, this is nudge theory, making the healthy decision easy and making the poor decision hard is called a sludge. So what we need to do, Manish, is we need to introduce this in our own digital usage. And what we need to do is we need to introduce and change aspects of our environment, both at home and at work and at school, to make that intended usage, that intended decision easy. And here's an example of that, right? We talk a lot about changing our home environment to make it not so compulsory that we pick up our phone every single chance we get. It's so easy to wake up first thing in the morning and grab our phones. Why? Because our phones are right next to our beds. Because our phones are underneath our pillows at night. We have become so attached and accustomed to using these at all times of the day. But if we take the simple decision to remove that stimulus from our environment completely, and if you live in an apartment or a house or wherever it is, to keep that device on the opposite end of the home from you when you're waking up, when you're going to sleep. Doing things like that, that's one aspect. That would be kind of a sludge, right? Making that poor decision harder. But let's think about the positive aspect of this and the positive psychology behind this, right? What do we intend to do instead of checking our phone for the first 30 minutes when we wake up? Personally, I love to read. I love to journal. And so for me, it's actually introducing those things into the environment to make that easy decision. So instead of my phone being right next to my bed, I have my journal, I have my book. And so now my mornings are much different because without even consciously thinking about it, I am actually subconsciously making the decision that I want easy. And that's what we try to do in all aspects of our interventions. And that's what we can do in all aspects of our lives, both personal and professional. So now let me give you an example on the organizational or the professional side of the equation. The same is true when it comes to the workplace. And we haven't talked a whole lot about the workplace, but I think it's a very, very important part of our overall digital wellness. Why do I think that? Well, our workplace has completely shifted over the past 10, 15 years, right? The way in which we as humans are expected to work, especially following the shift to hybrid remote work in 2020, has completely upended traditional working norm. Now, a recent Microsoft study just came out that showed that the majority of people now experience 275 interruptions during their working day. So that's messages, that's pings, that's emails, that's meetings, etc. 275. As a brain, as a human who has a brain, if I am receiving an onslaught of 275 notifications during a day, how am I to do my work? When it takes on average about 20 minutes to get back to a state of peak flow, right? During a workday, when we are most productive, when we are most recharged and feeling the best from our work. What I'm trying to say, Manish, is that when we feel this way at work, we feel so depleted after work. And the way that we deal with that depletion of energy is to look for the quickest and the fastest source of energy. And much like quickest and fastest source of energy when it comes to food, well, we know it's sugar. Sugar gives us the quickest burst of energy, but what happens right after that? It's not sustainable. And yet the mind craves it. The mind craves that quick solution. And so that's why this is intertwined. The way in which we work and the way in which we live outside of work in regards to our digital wellness is entirely intertwined. So when it comes to interventions at work, what can we do about this in terms of changing our work environment? Well, our work environment is often digital. And so there's software that we created at the Digital Wellness Institute in partnership with our friends at Produce 8 actually measures the digital workday for these employees, for screen-bound employees. It measures the amount of messages and of interruptions that they are receiving during the course of the day. It measures the amount of deep, focused work they are able to fit in during the day. And what it enables is custom nudges, custom changes to their workplace practices based off of that data to help them actually reach their workplace goals and actually get what they've intended to get done. And in doing so, we're shifting some of the norms around the workplace, and we're providing employees with their own data to go up to their boss and say, this is unsustainable. The way in which I am working is truly inefficient. It's not only not sustainable, Manish, it is inefficient. And greater efficiencies can be gained for the business as a whole when I work in a way that allows me an hour of uninterrupted focus time or 3 hours of meeting free time during the workday for me to actually get done what I need to get done. Because when we have a healthier workplace boundary, we can actually then choose to disconnect after work because we're not expected to be always on. And thus we can take that walk with our partners. We can take that, dinner with our friends and be completely unplugged and completely present.
Two issues which you just explained, dopamine loop decline in our and we rush for something which gives you instant fear, like a sugar, or this case could be 3 seconds of stimuli which gives you happiness. Or humans have always created something which gives them the instant spike. Now I think because we are living in a world where the attention spans have declined dramatically, these spikes required in a faster momentum. Earlier probably a man would require once a day this kind of spike. Now we require once in every 5 minutes, and I think this further shrinking to that. This dopamine loop which you just explained is such that once you get addicted to it, you don't realize that you are addicted to it. It causes decline, and you absolutely subconsciously you are open to get stimuli. Has to be trained, a newly born child, that this is not good for you. You need dog training. You need to use some kind of a nudge that dog should not do. And I think we're so hardwired in us now, and it's further making complicated in the children who are coming, that they do not find these boundaries to be realistic. They feel this digital world is real world, fantasy worlds are real world, virtual realities are the real world, and for them to interact socially have also declined dramatically. 3 seconds or 4 seconds of distraction cause another 20 minutes to come back to the normal state of focus or attention, which is completely deep and you can focus on things. How you expect an employee to be completely focused and creative after that and delivering performance, and you expect him to be also replying to the mails which bombard or messages which bombard to an employee? I see a lot of organizations do not give things much attention. They feel this is a part of a job. If 500 mails are coming, 200 mails are coming, people are supposed to answer the mail. At the same time they are supposed to finish their work or a project, and at the same time they also attend the meetings. At the same time they should also remain refreshed and give right decisions for important things they need to do, which is humanly we are expecting too much. Here's something with any organization which you have done which really felt that there is a change or shift happening, and what was that shift?
we as employees are measured not only by our utility, but effectively by our connectivity. By being connected at all hours, we are deemed to be a hard worker and we are deemed to be productive. When in reality, some of the most unproductive workers that we've seen are the ones that are on all day and all night, as we can imagine. What does that do to our energy? What does that do to our focus? And so in fighting against this work devotion schema and this notion that those who are sending emails at 9 p.m. at night and 10 p.m. at night are somehow more productive and harder workers than those who truncate their day and really focus for 8 full hours and get stuff done. That is something that is an uphill battle. That is something that we as a society really need to change. And that's what I've really done. That's what I've spearheaded at the Digital Wellness Institute. So what we do is we go to large institutions, big and small, and we work with teams within those companies to bring this to light, to talk about what it means to be a good employee and a productive employee in this digital age. And all of the things that we've talked about during the course of our conversation today, Manish, are ones that employees feel intimately. They really understand this pressure to be always on, to be constantly connected, and they recognize the impact that that is having to them and on their energy and on their productivity. And so what we do is, through a series of workshops, we gather data from the collective whole and we establish a baseline. We establish a baseline in terms of everything we've talked about: number of working hours, number of hours spent distracted during the workday, number of messages and distractions that come in, hours of productive work, etc. We establish a baseline. And from there, we go through about a 6-week program that includes a series of micro learnings, a series of lunch and learn discussions, where we really dive into each of these aspects as a whole. We talk about the importance of communicating boundaries at work. We talk about the importance of disconnecting from work after hours. We talk about the importance of skewing those traditional workplace norms, reward constant connectivity over those who might otherwise be more productive. And what we found is that just from that 6-week program, we were able to improve productivity by 30%, as well as decrease self-reported rates of behavioral or mental health by 12%. So that is a huge, huge impact. And what we're also able to do was that screen time during the workday, we're able to shave off 1.5 hours distracted screen time during the workday by actually having those healthier boundaries. Because as we talked about, when you don't have healthy boundaries, you're more likely to have more breaks during the day, TikTok, etc., etc. But when you actually change and truncate the workday and say, nope, these are the 8 hours that I'm going to be accessible, these are the 8 hours that I'm going to be productive, well, now you don't have time for that. Now you don't have time because you know at the end of those 8 hours, you can truly disconnect. So distracted screen time fell by 1.5 hours on average per employee, which accumulated to about 22% of their working day. So that is the impact that digital wellness in the workplace has. And I'll also share just a few more statistics from this because I think it's fascinating. If any of your listeners can attest to that feeling of, again, waking up in the morning and feeling that little bit of anxiety when you think, oh my goodness, I wonder how many emails I have. Or, oh my goodness, I wonder who's messaged me on Slack or Microsoft Teams this morning. Well, by having these boundaries and actually implementing them, we're able to decrease work-related anxiety by about 56%. And at the end of these 6 weeks, 92% of employees said that these healthier tech habits led to healthier tech habits of those around them and their family. Because these are not only employees, they're parents. They are siblings. They are, in some cases, children who are living with their elderly parents. And by modeling effective digital balance, they were able to change not only their habits, but the habits of those around them as well.
That's remarkable. 56%, and the numbers you are sharing, a 30% decline. It's amazing because, drawing these boundaries are very, very difficult for people. So we definitely need a committed organization and committed employees and committed individuals that they understand the impact their always connected behavior is making to them and their employees. That's remarkable. I would love to go more in detail with you whenever you have time. We were already struggling with Reels and TikTok and emails, and now there is a new villain, which is AI. Okay, now it has further fueled, not helped in a manner, but further fueled And I work on mindfulness and I work on compassion, and empathy plays very important. Now, these technologies doesn't have any emotions. They are ruthless with because they do not understand emotions in certain manner till now. I think hopefully in time to come AI will evolve and become which generates human emotions, but it's not too far because with AI therapists, with chatbot coaches are already on a rise, and we are somehow losing that human connection. We're constantly talking to a screen. We get habitual of not looking at someone's emotions. I give you tell one of my example. When I was working at an organization, I was heading an organization. There used to be a lot of conflicts in organizations. So I give you a very interesting example. So whenever somebody writes me a mail, a stinking mail, it's very easy for somebody to write me a stinking mail and download anything they wanted to say. But when they come and meet me in person, they are very sweet, they are very nice. So I really fail to understand that how a person who can write this kind of mail, but when he or she meets me, he's very sweet and kind. So what's this to behavior? How can he write or she write this kind of a mail, but at the same time when he comes in person can't express those feelings, and it's always nice? But that's human, they can. So what happens? But I found when you are not in front of someone, your human connect is almost broken. You become ruthless, you become very tech, you think not from your brain, you're very illogical thought process. But the moment you face a person, the emotion generates, that human touch come in place, and this deep tech cannot generate this empathy, compassion in a way. What do you think? What's your experience to this AI versus empathy?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said machines cannot understand emotion or cannot feel emotion, right? They can mimic emotion. And I was interested in this, so I actually Googled the definition of empathy. And I found that empathy is defined as the ability to emotionally understand what other people feel, see, and what other people feel and see things from their point of view, and the ability to imagine oneself in their place, right? So again, the core aspect is the ability to emotionally understand. So I looked up some of the traits of what it means to be empathetic, right? And it said the following, right? You are good at listening to what other people say. People often tell you about their problems. You are good at picking up on how other people are feeling. Other people come to you for advice. Now, all of those things sounds a lot like AI. AI does all of those. AI is pretty good at listening to what other people have to say. People very often come to AI with their problems. People very often ask AI for advice. But the distinction and the differentiation there is that ability to feel. Yes, a machine can mimic the emotions, but it can never truly feel, right? And I think that's the challenge that we have, because it feels like a machine is really caring about us. People are falling in love as we speak with AI chatbots, right? With AI characters. There is an element of that where people feel heard, right? They feel listened to. They feel like they can go to this with all of their problems. And it's a very delicate line, Manish. It's a very delicate line, because on one aspect, perhaps those are people that don't have other people in their lives who feel like they can go to, right? Or who listen to them with such interest and intent. But when we cross that threshold and develop a parasocial relationship with these AI chatbots, I think that's where we get into a danger zone. When we begin to misconstrue AI's ability not only to listen and to provide advice, but to think that it can feel for us, to think that it can really have emotion for us. That's when we teeter into the zone of what I call digital overuse and a zone of negative outcomes. And that's when we need to practice digital wellness to get back to that state of balance, because it all, again, is a spectrum. And if we can leverage AI for what it is to provide advice, that's amazing, that's wonderful. But when we teeter into that zone of overuse where we are now so connected and so attached and have a one-directional relationship with this entity, and we think that it feels for us and think that it cares for us, now that's when it's gotten dangerous, and that's when we need to scale back. So it's going to be an increasingly large challenge. I don't think that at any point in the future AI will ever have the ability to be truly empathetic. And that's going to be scary because it's going to be able to mimic a lot of the traits that people who have empathy have. But it's incumbent upon us as individuals to recognize that delineation, to understand that distinction, and to pull back and ensure that we are connecting with those who truly can provide us empathy, other humans.
We are bombarded with so much of emotions. We don't understand our emotions very correctly, and we do not know how to respond to certain people. I call emotional depletion because we do not know now. We ask smileys to express our emotions, but we do not know how to express when somebody comes and meets you, that how should I express myself in workplace. This depletion is happening because we do not know how to express emotions anymore, and we go to AI and ask that, how should I write sympathetic mail, add some compassion to it. So we are missing vocabulary for emotions further, and I don't think so it should happen. I love your concept of your book of tactical disconnection, which comes to this, that there is a disconnect happening. In your book, you have tactical disconnection. You have gone beyond the use of digital detox, and it aligns with what I call a micro mindfulness movements also, which I feel I read part of it. I've also written a book called Observe, which is very similar on thought process on that. Could you share how this tactical disconnection works, especially in that triple peak workday? I like the concept of it, triple week workday era. Can you just elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So tactical disconnection is my book, and it's a term that is used to define the intentional habits and the intentional practices of creating space between us and our technology during the day. And you can think of it as micro moments. That's absolutely correct. What it really is focused on is, again, when we place ourselves on that spectrum of digital use, and we find ourselves in the zone of digital overuse, right? And that's synonymous with the zone of negative outcomes. When we're in the zone of overuse, we experience negative outcomes. Tactical disconnection refers to strategies, micro practices that we can use when we find ourselves in that zone to get back to that state of parity, to get back to that state of optimal usage. And so it really focuses on three main aspects, and those are perception, intention, and action. And within those domains, or within those umbrellas, we have a series of micro tactics that we can implement during our workday and during our personal day outside of work to reclaim that sense of parity, to get back to that state of optimal usage. So many of the things that we've talked about already constitute tactical disconnection, and you can just think of them as tactics, right? What are some tactics that you use or your listeners use to get back to a state of digital optimal usage, right? Digital flourishing. So whether that is putting your phone outside of your bedroom when you sleep, whether that is avoiding your phone for the first 30 minutes after you wake up and the last 30 minutes before you go to sleep, whether that is carving out 30 minutes during your workday for a phone-free walk around the block, whether that is setting intentional boundaries at dinner with your family, with your children, to say this is a phone-free zone. And I, as a parent, am going to model that for you, right? Whether that is using blocking apps on your phone to distraction blockers, to block those apps that are distracting, and or to create moments throughout the day where you are intentionally choosing to use those apps, right? So if I say, great, I'm not going to disconnect completely, I'm not going to completely delete my Instagram account, but I am going to choose to use it between the hours 9 a.m. and 9:30, and then again 3:30 to 4 o'clock, right? And I set the parameters and I create the environment around me that allows me to use technology in a way that aligns with my intention. That's what tactical disconnection is. Tactical disconnection is really anything that anybody uses right now to align technology with their intentionality.
Once people start looking at the book and seeing those micro moments or micro practices, it further becomes easier for people to practice. It's only through practice that we can train our brain, and brain is a very strong thing. Once you train for the bad things, the loop constantly asks for this dopamine rush, and we go back to it. And I find this cold turkey usually works for me, that I completely delete an app when I think that I'm getting addicted to it. That's the only thing works, because if it stays in my phone, I may get lured towards that app and see what's happening here. Or I can see these notifications and there are 5-6 of them and I lured to see that one. But I think this tactical disconnection requires some sort of a willpower and a mental strength to control yourself, and you have very restrictive use or very disciplined use. We talk a lot about mindful leadership. And now this world is getting further very noisy. You see the political behavior of various countries, wars happening, news is flashing, anchors are shouting, colors used are red and bright, just hijack your mind. The news is such, you basically wanted to see what's happening. It's very difficult to have these simple rituals and habits as in habit forming when the stimuli are so strong and powerful. Because I practice mindfulness, I do meditation, but still to stay focused and present in this world, noisy world, becomes more and more challenging. Your book is breakthrough. If somebody has to do one practice from you, the book you like the most, which is the easiest to pick, which practice would you recommend? And if there is anything very short people can understand and remember.
I think the easiest thing is actually not a tactic at all. It's the foundation for a tactic. And that is opening our eyes, just opening our eyes to the world around us and recognizing how overconnected we are. And that's core to that central tenet. I mentioned perception as being the first kind of tenet of tactical disconnection. What we're really talking about is awakening our senses to the world around us and just understanding how overconnected we truly are. So if you're on a bus right now, or if you're on a subway, or if you are on the streets, I would encourage your listeners to look up, look around, and see how many people are interacting with their devices instead of interacting with the world around them. And then ask yourself, is that the way you wish to live, right? Is that the way you wish to live your life? And you can peel back the layers of that one further, and you can ask yourself of those around you, just pick any person. Ask yourself, what are your perceptions of them? How do you perceive them? Are they somebody that you perceive as attentive? Are they somebody that you perceive as being warm, open to connected? Are they somebody that you perceive as being productive? Somebody that you perceive as being trustworthy? Ask yourself that. Have no judgment. Just simply let those feelings, let those perceptions pass through. And then think about it the opposite way. Think about it, well, are those perceptions those which I would wish other people to have of me? If yes, then great. Then follow that, emulate that. If not, ask yourself, what can I change? How can I act differently in public spaces? How can I act differently in my own house? That would lead to different perceptions amongst those that are around me. And that really is a foundational aspect of tactical disconnection without even being a tactic in and of itself, Manish, because it's really important, especially in a workplace environment, to get a reset, to reset our expectations, to reset our understanding of the way the world works, and say, maybe I choose a different path. Maybe it would benefit me socially to choose a different path because of the different ways other people would perceive me. They might perceive me as being more attentive, more trustworthy, more productive. And that can only benefit me. That can only serve me in my path to becoming, either a better employee or rising the ranks of a corporate environment, or simply being a better parent or a better child. Without getting into the tactics so specifically, I really, really think that is the most foundational part of digital wellness.
I was reading that, the most beautiful people are those who have a big distance between their shoulder and ear. So that the bigger the distance between shoulder and ear, the more beautiful or handsome person looks. If you bring your phone closer, you see the distance between these two reduces dramatically. If you see people which distance is lesser, they become less beautiful, and the phone makes you less beautiful. So if you see people walking without their telephones or any gadget in their hand, their chest is out, their shoulders are broadened, and the head is a little more straight, and that makes them a little more handsome and beautiful. Let's do a little more fast forward. Just a ballpark figure for if there are 10 employees in an organization. What amount of time or money they would be losing of an organization?
That's a $1 million or $1 billion question, Manish. So ultimately, what it comes down to is productive versus unproductive work. So it's not only about screen time. Screen time is just a metric, but it's about what are we doing with that screen time? Now, if we as an employee are looking at the average 10-hour workday, which has now become 10 hours, the average 8-hour workday, which has increased about 2 hours since COVID, we're looking at about 1.5 of those 10 hours as being distracted or unproductive. Now, if we extrapolate that over the course of a week, a month, a year, we're losing hours and hours and hours, untold amounts of hours to distracted screen time. And the downstream effects of that are really, really impactful to the bottom line. What I think is most important, Manish, is to think about this in terms, again, that 10,000 hours metric that we talked about. Get a baseline. Understand how many hours you spend currently on screens. Qualify that as either productive or unproductive, or frankly, intentional versus unintentional. And then multiply that out over the course of a week, a month, a year, 5 years, 10 years. And you'll find that the amount of unproductive or unintentional screen time can add up to years of your life. And the way to recalibrate that is to think about making a tiny 1% improvement each and every day to realigning that unintentional screen time. And in my book, I talk about that the average 18-year-old American will spend on average about 4.6 hours on social media each day alone. Now, over the course of their lifetime, that equates to 12 years. Now, if that person were to recalibrate or to reassess, and 4.6 hours is maybe not my intention, or maybe I do not want to spend 12 years of my life on social media. If they were to just commit to making a 1% improvement, to cutting that time in half, it would only take them 60 days of cutting that screen time down by 1%, 1%, 1% to get to that place that is more aligned with their intention. Maybe it's 2.4 hours a day. And again, this is another extreme example, but just by committing to a 1% improvement over 60 days, they have effectively modified the equivalent of 6 years of their life over the long term. Now, this is an example of youth and students, but nevertheless, it can be applied to the workplace. And I think that's the main thing is really, again, getting a baseline, extrapolating that over the course of your working life and assessing, is this how I choose to spend my life?
What a colossal loss of time for individual and organization. And we do not realize that, this money, if it's just going into a black hole, which doesn't give us anything possibly, we're not driving anything out of it. It's only stealing something from us, our attention, our time, our efforts, our energy, just sapping. What do you see from 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or 15 years from now? How do you see this world? What excites you at one point and what worries you that what's coming?
What excites me is the number of young people, middle-aged, all ages, that are waking up to this notion of digital wellness. And I started by saying young people because I truly believe that young people are living this every single day, as we all are, but they are actually motivated and choosing to do something about it. There are a number of youth-led organizations right now that are not only bringing attention to this issue, but that are coming up with meaningful solutions to helping other youth have healthier relationships to technology. So that is the thing that most excites me, is the change that is happening in this space. And it is largely powered by the youngest amongst us. And that impact and that benefit will flow to all ages, because it's not just struggle with, but they are actively engaged in finding solution. I think what worries me, Manish, is the fact that technology is rapidly evolving. It is evolving faster and faster with each year. Certainly with artificial intelligence, that has grown exponentially. The rate at which technology is increasing has increased. And what scares me is that through all of this, we might lose sight of what it means to be human. We might lose sight of what it means to be connected to one another. Technology is going to make it increasingly easy for us to find that quick hit of dopamine. It's going to make it increasingly easy for us to build businesses without a need for employing their individuals. It's going to make it increasingly easy for us to find that perfect partner or build our perfect partner, so-called perfect partner, in our minds in the form of artificial intelligence. But at the end of the day, that scares me. The ease at which we are going to be able to potentially solve some of the biggest problems that we face in our lives, loneliness, a lack of connectedness, boredom, etc., inherently is going to mean that we lose some element of our humanity. Being human is to struggle. Being human is to face the challenges that come with our collected humanity, whether that is having disagreements with our partners, whether that is, again, finding a partner. But if all of those problems simply go away in the form of technology, we lose some aspect of what it means to be human. And I think that over the long run will be detrimental to our existence.
The Social Dilemma showed the dark side of internet. And now when you see programs like Black Mirror, you see the stark reality. And I was other day doing research, and things like emotional stimulation, whatever is shown in a kind of a dark mirror kind of program, it will not be a fiction but going to be a reality in soon to come. Because if we do not realize that what are we getting into, and we slowly slipping into the deeper and deeper before we reaching the point of no return as a human, it sounds scary, but it's also promising that what it brings. You will advise to a one student, one employee, and one householder. What would you have three different advices for these three people? Lightning advice which they can remember.
I think the advice is the same to each of them, just in different contexts, and that is, what is your intention, right? How do you intend to spend your time? What do you wish out of life, or wish for the place in which you are in life? If you're a student, what are your goals? Do you wish to build a group of friends? Do you wish to be at the top of your class? Do you wish to have fun? As a employee, do you wish to rise the ranks of the environment? Do you wish to be a manager where people can trust you, people come to you for advice? As a householder, do you wish to be a parent that is present? Do you wish to be your children and model certain values? That's the start. And then ask yourself, does your attention, the way in which you are spending your time, align with your intention? Does your attention align with your intention? And it's as simple as that. If yes, keep on keeping on. No, well, it's time to make a change.
So if student comes and asks you one word advice, what digital habit should I build for my lifelong resilience?
As a student, the one habit I would have to give is to increase attention spans by decreasing distractions. And I truly mean that. I mean, when we're focusing, when you're doing class, you're in class, you're doing classwork or doing studies outside of work, ensure that you are single tasking. You are truly present, focusing on the task at hand, focusing on the professor, focusing on those around you, focusing on your homework, and set intentional boundaries and give yourself breaks, but give yourself breaks that you can look forward to and understand that I'm going to study for 2 hours, but after that, I'll reward myself with a 10-minute scroll or what have you.
If I'm an employee and I come to you that, I have to protect my mental health from this always on workplace, what would be your advice?
Depends on where the employee is within the organization, because there's a lot of challenges that come just depending on where you are at within the organization. But broadly speaking, what I would say is that employee would and should bring attention to this topic with their superiors, with their managers. And that takes a lot of work. That's not an easy task. However, there's a lot of data to support why them doing so actually leads to greater levels of productivity and efficiency in the workplace. So ground the conversation for the need for boundaries, and ground the need for potentially what I would say is create a communication charter where you work with a small group of those around you to define normal working hours, to define what communication looks like during those working hours, to define scenarios in which communication outside of those working hours is appropriate, and understand and create a codified set of norms and values that your team can implement throughout the workday so that everybody is aligned on what is expected. When you have that alignment, when you have that understanding, you can cut back on some of that after hours. Again, you mentioned that triple P of the workday. You can begin to truncate that workday so that we are working together as a team during these defined set of hours, and this is the way that we work together. This is the way that we communicate. These are the scenarios in which it is appropriate for us to communicate. So I would set a communication charter for that employee.
Thank you, Tyler, for this advice. I have a lot of other questions. It's endless charter of questions I can keep asking, but we have a restriction on time. So Tyler, thank you so much for sharing your vision, the tools to thrive in this hyper connected world. You have shown that digital wellness isn't about disconnecting from tech. It's like tactical disconnection that you spoke about. It's about reconnecting with ourselves and drawing those boundaries which help us to define what we want to do in life rather than getting sucked into something which is sometimes meaningless in our life. And if we don't do this course correct, then world of Black Mirror won't be a fiction, it will be reality soon. And coming with augmented reality, mind-bending AI, brain-stimulating devices. I'm coming across almost everything now, even AI therapists to emotion-detected wearables. You talk about our surveillance capitalism, which social dilemma also talk about, digital dependency will only intensify the way it is going. But if we bring a mindful awareness, our ethical tech behavior, and human first behavior in emotions, I think we can shape future where technology enhances our consciousness instead of hijacking or depleting it in certain manner. If you wanted to practice mindfulness, my book Observe, you can only master this world when you have ability to observe your own mind and observe your environment. So read this book about Observe, where also I have spoken about digital world, and observation is the first step to freedom. If this conversation resonated with you, please subscribe, leave your review, share your thoughts, and if you have any question for me or Tyler, please do type in. We will love to respond to you. Until next time, stay mindful, stay human, and lead future with wisdom and awareness. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We see you again soon.